This is the story of a halted motorcade, a lowered security barrier, and the exact moment Queen Camilla realized the British Armed Forces do not swear allegiance to a title by marriage, in less than 24 hours, the carefully constructed illusion of her absolute command over the most lethal machinery of the state was quietly and ruthlessly dismantled at a military checkpoint. What Queen Camilla just realized behind closed doors is that a crown might grant you access to charity galas and state banquets, but true institutional hard power is forged entirely in the constitutional chain of command. Unbroken bloodlines and silent military control. Over the next few minutes, we are going to unpack the reckless public relations power grab. She recently attempted to overshadow Prince William, how the highest ranking generals of the Ministry of Defense uncovered the anomalous paperwork, the freezing institutional retaliation executed at a secure base perimeter, and Camilla's devastating realization that she possesses absolutely zero operational authority. To understand the sheer magnitude of this institutional collapse, you have to look at the staggering confidence Camilla operated with, right up until the moment the military gates closed in front of her. For 3 decades, she played the longest, most disciplined game of psychological chess in modern British history. She absorbed intense public hatred, systematically eroded the towering legacy of Princess Diana, and patiently integrated herself into the absolute center of the sovereign establishment. For Camilla, the journey from public enemy to queen consort was not enough. When the caveat of consort was quietly dropped from her title, she believed she had finally inherited the complete unquestioned authority of the crown itself. She watched from the balcony of Buckingham Palace as the military marched for her coronation, and she made a fatal psychological error. She confused ceremonial deference with absolute loyalty. This intoxicating illusion of absolute power led her to believe that she was the supreme matriarch, entirely in control of the dynasty's glittering legacy and its hard operational assets. She assumed that the British military and institutions steeped in centuries of blood and tradition would simply bend to her personal public relations agenda as long as she held the devotion of King Charles. That dangerous illusion of absolute power became a battlefield just days ago, triggered by an overwhelming sense of fading relevance. On June 2nd, Prince William conducted a highly publicised, historic visit to the Royal Navy Clyde submarine base to commemorate a major milestone for the submarine service. The visual impact of this engagement was staggering. William did not just look like a senior royal, he looked like the definitive commander-in-chief in waiting. The global press focused entirely on the undeniable momentum of the future king, his effortless command of the troops and his seamless integration into the highest echelons of national security. The overwhelming success of William's military engagement triggered intense paranoia within Camilla's private office. Fearing that her heavily curated image of sovereign supremacy was being systematically overshadowed by the next generation, Camilla's aristocratic facade cracked. Driven by a profound commercial desperation to maintain her public value, she attempted a staggering secret maneuver. Behind the scenes, Camilla's communications team orchestrated a surprise, high-profile inspection of a separate elite military installation. This was not designed to be a quiet, supportive welfare visit for the troops. It was a calculated, aggressive public relations stunt designed to steal the global spotlight back from the Prince of Wales. According to internal palace leaks, her office issued a strict binding directive to the base commanders, demanding that the Queen be received with the exact same sovereign-level military honours typically reserved for the reigning monarch or the direct heir apparent. She demanded a full guard of honour, a massive media presence, and a reception that would visually elevate her to the absolute pinnacle of state power. She wanted to use the immense glittering prestige of the British military as a backdrop for her own personal branding, attempting to blur the lines between the House of Windsor's bloodline and her acquired status. She assumed she could quietly push these protocol demands through the military bureaucracy, firmly believing that no general would dare question the logistical demands of the king's wife. She severely underestimated the cold, forensic vigilance of the British Armed Forces, and the unyielding nature of the constitutional chain of command. The discovery of this secret military coup did not happen through an open family confrontation, but through a routine review of operational security manifests. The Ministry of Defense does not operate on drawing room gossip or palace favoritism. It operates on strict constitutional law. When the anomalous protocol requests from Camilla's office reached the highest ranking generals, the reality was immediate and chilling. They recognized this not as a harmless public relations exercise, but as a parasitic encroachment upon the sovereign chain of command. The military brass took the paperwork directly to the one man who actually holds the institutional authority to intervene, Prince William. When William reviewed the logistics registries demanding sovereign military honors for his stepmother, he saw a severe security and protocol violation. Camilla was attempting to weaponize the armed forces to establish a visual foothold of hard power that she constitutionally does not possess. The retaliation from the future king and the military establishment was a masterclass in weaponized protocol and silent administrative execution. Prince William did not leak the attempted PR stunt to the tabloids, nor did he issue a public condemnation that would embarrass the crown. He used the cold, unyielding machinery of the state to execute a flawless counterstrike. Operating in total alignment with the Ministry of Defense, William quietly activated a strict binding administrative update regarding military base access and sovereign honors. This internal legal mechanism explicitly clarified that elite military installations and sovereign-level guards of honor are strictly reserved for individuals within the direct constitutional line of succession or those carrying a specific, explicit mandate from the joint command of the monarch and the heir. Without a single word spoken in anger, William legally and cleanly severed Camilla's ability to command the armed forces for her own vanity. The execution of this silent retaliation was breathtaking in its subtlety, resulting in an absolute visual humiliation for the Queen. On the morning of her planned surprise inspection, as Camilla's heavily guarded motorcade and advanced public relations team approached the secure perimeter of the military base, they did not find a grand welcoming committee or a guard of honor. Instead, they hit an invisible, impenetrable wall of military protocol. The heavily armed security personnel at the checkpoint, operating under direct binding orders from the Ministry of Defense and the heir apparent's office, politely but firmly halted the vehicles. They informed the Queen's staff that their security clearance for a sovereign level inspection had not been authorized by the constitutional chain of command, and their entry was denied. As the reality of the halted motorcade and the lowered security barrier set in, Camilla experienced a wave of cold, suffocating panic. She had to sit in the back of her armored vehicle surrounded by her own press team, while secretly knowing her entire operation was being literally turned away by the soldiers she thought she commanded. Stripped of her illusion of absolute control, administratively walled off by her stepson, and publicly disciplined without a single word being spoken, she realized the trap had snapped shut. Her administrative trick had not only failed, but it had permanently exposed her total lack of operational hard power. Terrified by the sudden collapse of her secret PR pipeline, Camilla ordered her motorcade to retreat. She went directly to King Charles, presenting the restricted base access reports and demanding that he use his supreme sovereign power to crush William's administrative blockade. She demanded that the king force the military to grant her the honors. She desired and aggressively enforce her absolute authority as queen. The entire future of the internal royal hierarchy hung in the heavy, suffocating silence of the king's study, waiting for his response. When Queen Camilla stood in the quiet sanctuary of the king's study, demanding that Charles use the absolute power of the sovereign to override the Ministry of Defense and crush William's administrative blockade, she expected immediate compliance. For 30 years, Charles had been her ultimate shield. He had fought his mother, his advisors, the British press, and his own children to force Camilla's acceptance into the royal fold. Camilla fully expected that in this moment of acute administrative humiliation, Charles would summon Prince William and deliver a crushing reprimand. She expected the king to remind his heir and the generals that Camilla was the queen, and that the armed forces must salute her. But she encountered something far more terrifying than anger. She encountered a devastating silence. What appears to be true, according to those familiar with the internal dynamics of the king's household, is that Charles simply refused to intervene. He did not yell. He did not defend his wife's attempt to hijack a military inspection. He looked at the restricted access report, sat in the suffocating quiet of his office, and did absolutely nothing. This was the psychological climax of Camilla's decades-long campaign for power, and it ended with a freezing realization. Charles is no longer the rebel Prince of Wales fighting for his mistreated lover. He is the king. And as the monarch facing his own profound vulnerabilities and the fragile state of his reign, his primary overriding duty is the survival of the crown. Charles knows with forensic clarity that the British military swears an oath to the king and his heirs, not to the king's spouse. To override the constitutional chain of command and force generals to bow to a PR stunt would be an act of institutional suicide. Charles chose the integrity of the armed forces over the vanity of his wife. In that singular moment of silence, Camilla learned the hardest lesson of her royal life. The king will no longer save her from the Prince of Wales. To understand why this administrative lockout is so permanently catastrophic for Camilla, we must examine the staggering reality hiding behind her royal title. The public sees a queen consort reviewing troops on ceremonial birthdays and waving from the balcony. But behind closed doors, the forensic architecture of the firm tells a remarkably different story. Camilla owns virtually nothing of the royal estate, and she commands absolutely no hard power. Her secret maneuvering with the military base was never just about a single news cycle. It was a frantic, calculated attempt to secure a permanent visual foothold of supreme authority before her ultimate protector is gone. She knew that without King Charles, she would instantly become a guest in an empire entirely controlled by a man who holds all the actual capital and the loyalty of the armed forces. Prince William is not just the heir to the throne. He is the landlord of the Duchy of Cornwall and the future commander-in-chief. Camilla possesses no independent constitutional authority to fall back on. By legally and cleanly blocking her access to military bases, William quietly and permanently locked her out of the ultimate symbol of sovereign power. The realization that she is now entirely at the mercy of her stepson's administrative goodwill is a psychological prison of her own making. The illusion of absolute power was instantly replaced by the stark, terrifying reality of her constitutional irrelevance. As Camilla's shadow empire was quietly dismantled at the military checkpoint, the visual landscape of the monarchy began to immediately reflect the new order. In the days following this internal crisis, viewers and royal analysts noticed a profound, subtle shift in how protocol is being weaponized. The Princess of Wales emerged as a portrait of freezing aristocratic restraint. Catherine did not need to issue a statement condemning Camilla's attempted military stunt, and she did not need to demand salutes from generals. She simply allowed the massive, quiet weight of her own track record to protect the institution. While Camilla scrambled in desperation to manufacture an image of supreme command, Catherine executed her duties with uncomplaining sacrifice and steadfast loyalty to the crown. Catherine understands the fundamental difference between ceremonial duty and the constitutional chain of command. She demonstrated that fierce protection of the heritage and genuine respect for the armed forces will always outmaneuver the unchecked ambition of outsiders. She does not need to fight Camilla for dominance because her husband has already engineered the ultimate checkmate. The true royals remain on the inside, protecting the integrity of the state, and the liabilities are managed from the outside. This brings us to the deeper tragic meaning of this entire crisis. Camilla spent 30 years carefully clawing her way to the very top of the British social hierarchy. She endured intense public hatred, she orchestrated a masterful public relations rehabilitation, and she successfully convinced Charles to place the highest crown in the land upon her head. She believed that reaching the summit meant she would finally be safe, that she could secure her future and rewrite the history of the dynasty in her own image. But what this story undeniably proves is that the crown on Camilla's head is entirely hollow. She is surrounded by the trappings of unimaginable power. Yet she is paralyzed by the reality that she is merely a temporary figure in William's empire. She played a 30-year game of chess, sacrificing everything for the ultimate title, only to realize, too late, that the military does not answer to her. Camilla is now trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, sitting next to a king who will no longer defend her, walled off from the true power of the state, and forced to live under the absolute unyielding authority of the next generation. The era of the Shadow Queen is effectively over. If you want to continue unpacking the silent warfare, the hidden administrative maneuvers, and the psychological power dynamics of the modern British monarchy, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We will continue to pull back the curtain on the illusions of power, one subtle detail at a time. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next analysis.